What's up, YouTube? The reason I'm making this video is because I'm reading a fascinating book about an amazing woman named Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks was a poor black tobacco farmer who was born in the 1920s and grew up in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. She eventually died in 1951 from cervical cancer. How I learned about Henrietta Lacks, well, let me give you the first introduction. It was during Black History Month, and someone made a comment on Facebook, quote, "Does anybody know about Henrietta Lacks? Please Google Henrietta Lacks." Now, and I just thought it was another Facebook quote. I really didn't pay any attention because I thought I knew who Henrietta Lacks was. I thought Henrietta Lacks was the black woman who had this big butt who they used to parade around in the circus. You know, she was basically a circus freak, and she died poor and lonely and with a broken heart because they would parade her around because she had a big butt, and they paraded her around like a circus freak. So I really didn't bother to Google it. So a month later, I'm looking on YouTube and I'm scanning different videos, you know, because I like to learn about stuff like the Moors. I like to listen to the 5%ers and Hebrew Israelites and, you know, anything religious or philosophical or scientific or anything dealing with history. So I happened to see this 5%er talking about, he was being interviewed, and the guy said that he was going to keep his guest secret because the guest didn't want to be known, because the guest had to drop some deep knowledge that he didn't really want anybody to know who he was. So that kind of like piqued my curiosity, and I wanted to see what he was talking about. So basically, he started talking about the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks, and he showed this book. And this book is written by Rebecca Skloot. She's a white author who wrote the book about Henrietta Lacks. And Henrietta Lacks was a poor black tobacco farmer who born in the 1920s. And her parents, you know, her mother died when she was a young girl, and her father not able to take care of the siblings. You know, back then times was hard. So the family and their siblings was split up amongst aunts and uncles and grandfathers and so forth. Henrietta Lacks went to go live with her grandfather, and her grandfather was already taking care of other siblings, other family members of Henrietta Lacks' aunt, or Henrietta Lacks' mother's kids. And one of those kids was David Lacks, or they called him Day. He was 5 years older than Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta was about 4, and I guess Dave was about 9. And she went to live with them. They, you know, basically slept in the same bed together. To make a long story short, eventually they end up getting married and had kids together. Soon afterwards, you know, the family moved to a town called Turner, Maryland. It's right outside Baltimore. They were living in Clover, Virginia. And when they got older, I guess in the early 20s, they moved to Turner, Maryland. And, you know, they, you know, had a normal life until tragedy struck. One day Henrietta Lacks found, you know, a lump in her groin, and she had abnormal bleeding. So she went to the colored ward of Johns Hopkins University, to the clinic, and she basically was diagnosed with cancer. I might have to make 2 parts to this video. And at that time, when she was diagnosed with cancer, at that time in the country, there was like an international debate going on as to the best way to treat cervical cancer, which Henrietta Lacks was diagnosed with. Now, there were two basically two types of cervical cancer. There was the cervical cancer, which was surface cervical cancer, and then there was the more penetratable cervical cancer. And doctors basically didn't treat the surface cervical cancer as aggressively as they did the more penetratable one. They would treat that one more aggressively. But there was this Dr. Gray or Dr. Guy who came up with a theory that if you don't treat the surface cervical cancer as aggressively, then it would eventually turn into the more penetratable cervical cancer. And he went around lecturing in the scientific community, and they basically laughed him off the stage or out of the scientific community. And he thought that, well, if only he can grow some cells out of the human body or keep them alive in a petri dish or a culture dish long enough to prove his theory, that he would show the scientific community that he was right all along. And at this, I'm going to end part 1. I'm going to start part 2, because I really want to get this video out, because this is such an amazing and fascinating story. So I'm going to end here and pick up the story in part 2.